Hello, everyone. I'm Anestarita, and I am an immersive designer working in social AR for all types of brands like Nike, Discovery, and a lot of music artists. Today, I'll be showing you how to create this super fun effect to get started in social AR. And in the process, we'll talk about Metaspark, its capabilities and features, and how it relates to other node-based creation tools like TouchDesigner and Unreal Engine. So let's get started. So when we first open Metaspark Studio, this is the screen that receives us. And as you can see, you have the option of creating a blank project or use templates. A thing to notice about Metaspark Studio is, as its name says it, is developed by Meta, meaning that you can use whatever you're creating here in their tools. That's Instagram and Facebook for now, but also you can use it on video call effects on their tools, meaning like Messenger and like Instagram chat. One of the reasons why you might want to work with Metaspark Studio or any of the social AR tools like TikTok Effect House or like Snap Lens is because these social AR tools use very powerful computer vision models. One of the most important things when working on AR is that you need to have a way of your system, of your computer, to recognize a face, to recognize an eye, a gesture, to know where the ground plane is. Those models, those computer vision models take a lot of effort to create. And even though you could create the same effect in somewhere like Unreal Engine, or you could create it even in TouchDesigner, those libraries are very heavy libraries. And these companies have put a lot of money and effort on creating very precise computer vision models that you can leverage with these tools. So the thing is, you see here on the templates, you have not only face tracking and things that detect to touch to your face, but you have image tracking, you have things like plane tracking, detecting objects, detecting walls, detecting ground on the space. All those things are things that are possible because of their computer vision models. So that's a thing to take in consideration when picking which tool to work. In this case, what we're going to use is sort of a blank project, but we're going to create a blank project that says sharing effect. What this means is that this project is going to be directed to Instagram and Facebook as an AR effect, simple. And so if I come in here and I say sharing effect, what I have is this screen. This is what receives me. And so what I have here is my scene viewer, my scene to the left. And this is like an outliner. It contains everything that is on my scene. By default, it always comes with device, camera, a standard light, an ambient light, and a directional light, and the microphone. These are things that are on all your scenes because that's the minimum you need. You need the phone with a camera. And so that's what exists there. And then also in the same area of the panel, you have the layers. We're not going to go over them today, but know that they are there. And now down here, you have the assets, and here leave all the assets that you're going to use on your scene. Whether those are 3D assets, 2D assets, they are there. Here on the middle, you have your viewport, which is like a 3D representation of your scene. And next to the viewport, you have your simulator, which is a 2D representation, or mostly how you would see it when you see it on the screen. And here to the right, you have your properties panel. That is a contextual menu that changes depending on what you're selecting and what are the properties of whatever object you are selecting. To navigate in your viewport, you have two ways. One is using like right click, for example, to rotate. You can use the right click here, hold it and rotate. You can use the scroll button and hold it to pan, or you can use the scroll button and scroll in and out to zoom. But for example, if you're in a laptop or you have a difficulty finding a right click, you could press Control and your left click to rotate and Alt and your left click to pan. And still, you have to do whatever tool you have accessible. If you have like the trackpad, you can use the trackpad to zoom in and out. But it's like a very cool thing about this tool is that it's developed to work in a variety of systems. It is not super taxing, and it's a tool that you can use in a laptop or on a workstation. It is very, very versatile. And so, as I was saying initially, one of the reasons why you want to use these tools is because they have very cool models, very cool libraries of computer vision. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to track something on our head, the head of our user. And so to do that, when I come here to my scene, I have this little plus sign. If I click in here, what I have is all the objects that I can use on my effect right now. And so the first section, the most important, is what they call a scene understanding, which are these tools that allows the computer to understand what's going on in the scene. And I have a face tracker, a plane tracker, a target tracker, which is what allows you to track images, and a hand tracker. And I also have things like my 3D objects, general 3D objects. I have 2D objects. I have lights, and I have effects that includes particle systems and sound effects. So in this case, what I'm going to come is that I'm going to take my face tracker, I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to say insert. And in the moment I do that, if you notice, it immediately creates a 3D gimbal that is following my relative head position. This video doesn't have much of a Z movement, but if I was moving back and forth, or if the video was moving back and forth, you would see that gimbal also has notion of the Z space. And this is where these like computer vision models are very important, because they are doing all this processing for you. You don't have to create your own library. You don't have to train your own library. You don't have to like figure out all these things. You can just use their libraries and connect things. So what is so cool about this is that just like this, I can drop anything under this face tracker and it's going to follow it. And I'm going to do it immediately. I'm going to come here, hit plus, and I'm going to create a plane. So I say my 3D objects, I hit a plane, I hit insert. And if I take this plane, I select it and drop it under my face tracker once it is highlighted. As you can see, this plane is following my face tracker, just like that. I didn't have to do anything fancy. And so what is so cool about this is that now I can start designing around here. If I can move my plane, for example, I can move it using the navigation tools. If you see, if I'm selecting my plane tracker, I have up here also like other navigation tools that allows me to change things one by one. So I can do this, but also I could just come here on the transformation panels and change it. Another thing is like maybe I'm moving this and I'm having a really hard time getting my things to follow because I don't know where there's stop ending at the end. I can hit pause and I can actually make sure that my subject is in a rather like static place, and I can zero out everything to have more control over how my scene is looking. And now I can like be more easily like move things and be like, hey, I actually want to have this up here and I want to have this in here. And that kind of looks more like what I'm looking to do. Okay, so I'm going to hit 0 here. If I hit play, now it's in the relative position I want it to be. So just like another thing, just like in regular tools of 3D, you have also like control navigations to move this. Not only this, you could also use your E, your R, and your T to move around, or your position. Again, it's a tool that has a lot of ways that you can access it, a lot of ways that you can play with it. So I have my plane, but I don't have anything on it. You know what I mean? And I want to make it look cool. So I'm going to come to my assets panel, and I can hit here on my plus sign. And immediately I have a set of things. I can either import assets, bring assets from other places, or I can create assets within here. That includes material, that includes scripts. And we'll talk about later about animation sequences in particular. So what I want to do is that I can also use something that they have called the AR library. And this AR library includes assets that are both created by MetaSpark or assets that are on the Sketchfab library that you can use. A lot of these assets are already optimized to use with AR, so they are very useful. For now, for example, I want to use this high-res sphere primitive. As I say import free, immediately it comes into my asset panel. And so if I wanted, I could also drop it. I mean, this is not what I'm trying to do right now, but if I want, I could drop this sphere into my face tracker, and now I have an 3D sphere following my face. That's not what I'm trying to do, so I'm just going to delete it. And I'm going to do is that I'm going to come here plus again, and I'm going to import my images. The first thing that I want to do is import my frame. So I can say, hey, import from computer, and select my frame. And here it is. You have it. And now I want to also import my burst animations, if you remember. So I can say import, and I can do two things. I can say import from computer, just like I did. Select my first burst animation and select all my frames, or bringing them in here and say open. And so when I open them, it actually brings all the frames separated. So it is a bit inconvenient because what I want is a texture sequence. But if I select all my frames, I select the first one, shift, I select the last one, I see in here, I have the option, instead of having single texture, I can say texture sequence. So if I say texture sequence, it immediately makes this into a single texture sequence. However, this texture sequence doesn't have a player. I need to tell it how many frames per second I wanted to play, what is the speed that I wanted to use. And as you can see, this is telling me how many frames there is, but it's not giving me options to control the frame rate or anything like that. To do that, what I do is that I come here in my plus sign and I say, hey, let's create an animation sequence. And now I'm going to call this burst 01 sequence. I can select my texture now that I have this. I can, in the texture, I can select my burst sequence that I just created, and I can actually control how many frames I wanted to say. I want it to be at 12 frames per second, for example. And so like that, I have my first texture sequence, but I'm not seeing anything. So before I move forward, I actually want to put something on this plane so you see how would I attach things to my object. And so remember, this is a 3D object, and like any 3D object, it does need a material to render. So what I'm going to do is I can either come here to my plane. If I select this contextual menu, I see that I have the option of adding materials. If I come here on plus, what it's gonna do is that it's gonna create a material. I don't have any material. So what it's gonna do, it did immediately create material 0. I'm gonna rename this very quickly, first 01 matte. And if I come here to the texture, to the material, I notice is like a material like any other in any other software. I have standard materials, I have PVR materials, I have flat materials, which are materials that are not affected by light or anything. I have face materials that are specifically for makeup, as well as like blender materials that are specifically for AR tools, and shader assets that I can code. In this case, standard is fine. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select on my texture, my burst 01 sequence. And immediately, just like that, because my material is added to my plane acquires the material. However, it's looking a little bit dull. This is not exactly what I want. So to fix that, what I can come down here, and in my render options, if you notice, I also have blend modes. And so what is cool about this is that this material, even though it's a standard material that is being affected by the light and everything, it can blend with the scene as a 2D texture that uses an add blend mode. And so when I change to add, you can see that immediately it becomes like more poppy, it becomes more evident, like feels more strong. And so this is one way that I could add my texture sequence. Another way that I could add my texture sequence that is even more effective is I can say, hey, import texture animation. I can say choose files. And I come here to burst 02 and I select this. So in the moment I add this, ask me if I wanted to add to plane. I'm going to say yes, actually, because I want to add it to plane. If I didn't want it, I could like uncheck this. And what it would do is that I would bring all my frames as a sequence. It would create immediately my animation sequence, as you see here, with a standard frame rate that I'm going to use. I'm going to change to 12 because I know that I work on 12. And what it does, because I say that I wanted to create a plane, is that it created a 3D plane. So what is good about this is that now I can just drop my plane under my face tracker and it's following. And if I come here to the material that it created, that I'm going to rename to keep track of everything, to keep my scene organized. If I come in here, I have the same options. I can change my blend mode to add. And in this case, it made the shader flat because it's a texture sequence. So it's assuming that I don't want to have any interference from light of the scene. Maybe I'm going to keep it back to standard because that's how I have the other. And I would like to have some shadow. So I have this plane and I have the burst plane that it created. And the same thing, I can hit pause whenever my subject is on the middle. And I can like put it on a location that feels like more correct. I press E to get out my move gimbal options. And what I can do here too is that I can change my scale. I can put it like 1.3, 1.3, and 1.3. And so like that, I have my second one. And if you notice, it's a second texture. And very quickly, the last thing that I want to do is that I want to add my third texture, my third burst. So I'm going to take this one, actually, the plain one, and I'm going to duplicate it. And I'm going to pause again. Oh, and I'm going to get it to get to here. And I'm just going to move it down here, maybe. And I'm going to make this smaller, 0.8, 0.8, and 0.8. And just like that, I have my 3 bursts. The last thing that I want to do is that I want to add my frame. And so these are 3D objects, and these 3D objects are being tracked, but like this plane is actually something that is overlaying my whole scene. There's something to do that called canvas. And a canvas is basically a container that holds 2D objects, and it's responsive to the size of the screen. What this is gonna do is that independently whether my screen is an iPhone screen or an Android screen, my screen has a different aspect ratio, whatever is inside this canvas, if it's stretching the canvas, is gonna adapt to that. So I have my canvas, and now I'm gonna add a rectangle. And if I add my rectangle, you can see it's in this corner. Because this is attached to the canvas, you can see my rectangle. Whenever I change, for example, here on the simulator, if I come to these 3 dots, I can change my device. If I change, for example, to a Google Pixel 5, you see it rearrange to like fit on the right location that would be the equivalent to that or to what I want on my scene. So you can see it keeps that relative position. So that's one of the reasons why canvas are so cool, because you just have to bring one asset and it resets it. So the other thing that I want to do is that I want this to go through my whole screen. Remember, this is my frame. So if I come here to my frame, I select it. My properties menu that is responsive, that is dynamic, moves to this. If I click in here in width, I immediately have the option to select fill width. And if I click in height, I immediately have the option to select fill height. And just like that, I have something that is taking my whole screen. And so again, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a material, and this material is going to be called frame. And on this frame material, I'm going to add my frame, and I'm going to make sure I add my frame material to my rectangle. So I'm going to come here to rectangle, where it says materials. I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to say, hey, let's select frame. And the last thing I want to do with frame is that I want to make it an add plane mode. So if you notice, we're having this weird clipping that's happening. You can see it here once in a while that is happening where my 2D objects, my 3D objects are interacting with my 3D scene. The reason what's happening is because even though this is an overlay, this overlay exists in this scene, as you can notice, in a sort of a 3D space. How do I fix that? I go to advanced render options. And what I do is that I turn off my use of depth test and my right to depth. What it does is that it stops trying to project this into actual 3D space. Now this just exists like an overlay. This is a very useful tool when you're working with like multiple things and you want them to occlude, but in this case, it is being disruptive. So we just turn this off, and as you can see, we no longer have that issue going on, because now this object doesn't exists like in a different plane. It exists in the 2D plane. It's no longer interacting with the objects on the 3D plane. The last thing that I want to do is add my interactions. And the last part that I didn't show you of the navigation on Metaspark is the patch editor. And this is where everything we've been doing in notes before comes super handy. If I come to my view menu, I can select show patch editor. And this patch editor is basically where I build my interactions in Metaspark Studio. I can use JavaScript or I can use the patch editor. The patch editor is a visual way of doing like coding, visual coding, and it's super powerful. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to bring my face tracker. Because it's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to select my face tracker here. And if I select it and drag it down here, it immediately comes to the patch editor with a set of nodes connections that are necessary to work with it. Not only do I have the face finder, I have a face select because I can track more than one face. And I have certain tools like 3D position, 3D scale, and 3D rotation of my face, just in case I need to use them. A cool thing about the patch editor, if right click in here, I get access to all the tools you have. I have tools like of animation, audio, body landmarks. I have things like logic and math that are the same thing we've seen in any other node-based tool. I have things like multiplier that are not usable on the sharing effect. They are usable on effects like for calls, so we don't have access to them right now. And I have shaders and other types of utilities that allow me to organize things. So for example, a bounding box, 2D vector unpack, 3D vector unpack, things like that. In this case, because I don't have anything selected and I just like right click on the menu on like the patch editor, I get access to everything. But if I select, for example, face select, if I select here and I click and I release, what I have is a contextual menu, meaning it's showing me only the tools that I can use with the patch editor. In this case, because what I want to have is my mouth open as an interaction, what I need is going to my interaction menu and find that interaction that works with my face. As you notice, I only have interactions that work with the face select. If I had it on the general menu, I would have also interactions that work with body, that works with trackers and other things. So in this case, I'm going to select my open mouth open. I say add patch, and it immediately adds this patch. I'm going to delete the face tracker because I'm not going to use it anymore. And as you notice, there's something that is like an open state. So this is like a Boolean that tells me mouth is open, mouth is closed. I'm going to create very quickly a pulse. And a pulse is a signal, is a signal that goes on and off if a Boolean goes on and off. Imagine sort of a trigger. So I say add. And so as you can see, when the person opens their mouth, the pulse goes from on to off. When they close the mouth, it goes to off. And actually, I'm going to change the preview video. So we have a video where the mouth opens more often. So if I come here to this video window, video icon, I can select other real-time simulations. This is a simulation that I uploaded earlier, the first one you saw. And so if you see, whenever the mouth is open, this is trigger on. Whenever it's closed, it's trigger off. And the final thing that I want to do is that I want to use this to play the animation whenever the mouth is on, and don't play the animation whenever the mouth is off. So what I have to do is that I have to bring my animation sequence into this. So whenever you select an object on the properties panel, you'll notice that some things here and there have this like little arrow that goes towards in, like an input. What this arrow means is that this is an event, or this is a property that can be controlled in my patch editor. So in this case, for example, for burst one sequence, what I can control in my patch editor is current frame. So if I come here and I hit current frame, if you notice, it is on 0, so I don't see anything. If I come here and write something like 8, it is stuck on the frame 8. If I come here and write something like 6, it is stuck on the frame 6. What I want to do is that I want to make it run from frame 0 to frame 14, because it has 15 frames. And once it runs that, I want it to loop if the mouth is open or stop if the mouth is closed. So the first thing that I would do in that case is that I would create something like a loop animation. And I'm going to show you something super cool that Spark does. So I'm going to select loop animation. And it not only created my loop animation, it created another patch called switch. Why did it do that? Because my loop animation requires a switch patch. And that's one of the cool things of Meta Spark Studio. If I were to create only without using the contextual menu, my loop animation, and I try to connect it, it would immediately create the switch patch. If I have my switch patch, for example, and I go and create my loop animation without any context, it takes it anyway because these two work together. But what is cool is that it allows you, like it protects you from like that sort of like, oh, I forgot to add that comma. Like that switch patch is like sort of that, like changing one value that is a trigger to a Boolean. And so by doing so, like it makes it that you have less errors. Sometimes you might have a situation in which you delete something in the middle and it's still connected. You will have here a red dot that says that something is broken, and it will tell you where it's broken. But in general, it protects you from that sort of mistake. And so if I have here, if you see what I have here is that I have my loop animation. And if I were to connect this directly to my current frame, I only have something that goes from 0 to 1, because that's what my loop animation does. It literally says, hey, I'm looping from 0 to 1, looping from 0 to 1, looping from 0 to 1 in 1 second, or looping to 0 to 1 from 0 to 1 in 2 seconds. But it's not changing frames. And what I need to do here is that I need to select a frame that I wanted to change between in that cycle of loop. So what I would do is that I come here on progress, and again, I can select frame transition. As the name says it goes from frame 0 to whatever number of frame in the amount of time that my loop animation goes. So I'm going to say I have 15 frames because I know I have 15 frames. My first frame is 0. And if I connect this to this, now we're talking. Now my animation is looping from 0 to 15 in 2 seconds, which is too much. So it would be more like 1.2, and that would be closer to the 12. And it's fine, but you know what? It is like, actually it's working pretty well. But my animation, if you notice, is like stuck on the last frame where my mouth is closed. I don't like that. How can I get rid of that? I think that I could do very easy is that I can take my pulse animation. And right now what's happening is that the switch is using a flip, isn't it? When it's on, it's on. When it's off. But I could also take these off directly, because if you notice, this is a turn off, and just connect it to my reset. So whenever it's off, my animation just go back to 0. And like that, whenever it starts from scratch. So you can see it. It's 0. It's on. And it goes back from 0 whenever it's not animated. So just like that, I have my animation playing and it's working well. What I want to do now, though, is that I want to do the same thing on the other object. So what I would do is that I can just, simple as that, take my mouth open. I don't have to redo everything. And I can just add a delay. I can select my pulse. I can select all this. I'm going to say Control-C, Control-V. And I can plug it on here. And I can very easily just select this burst animation sequence. And just like we did last time, current frame, I attach it here. They have the same duration. But what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take my delay and I'm going to add a 0.5. So now it's starting at a different moment. I'm having a little issue here where it's like stall is holding. It's saying like, what's happening that? If you notice, what's happening is that sometimes it is not resetting at the same time the switch is switching from on and off. The easiest way to fix that is controlling everything from this pulse. So instead of using the flip, you turn off the flip and you connect turn on to turn on, turn off to turn off. And the same here, you would do turn on to turn on, turn off to turn off. And just like that, that was solved. And so as you can see, I have like a very simple scene where things are moving around, things are being reactive. My scene, like I'm using my face tracker to control things. But what is so cool about this is that now I can start playing with delays. I can, for example, create a second material of these, of one of these little planes. And that second material can have a different delay. I can even add a delay somewhere around here. I can change the speed of my loop to change the speed of my animation. All those things I can do using my patch editor. And there's a lot of things that we can do in here, you know, like Right now we're using face trackers, but we could even take the information of the face tracker and not attach anything to it, but use that information to control something else. So the possibilities are very, very big between Metaspark AR. The last thing that I want to show you before we're done for today is like, okay, I did this, super cool, but like, how do I show it to anybody? Here on the left side, you have some tools that are super useful. We talk about already pausing. We talk about changing the video. You have your interface on the workspace. Here, you have the option of test on device. If you hit send, for example, this is going to create an Instagram private link that you can share with 50 people. But if, for example, I come here and hit publish, this is going to allow me to export or upload my file into my Metaspark Hub for publication, and I'm going to have this effect on my profile. So that are the two ways. I mean, one is for test links, but this is the way that you would export, and we can talk about it more later. But I would like to hear from you, like, what would you like to see on this series about Metaspark? Like, what is a thing that you've seen that you think is super cool you would like to try to do, whether it's like plane trackers or like worldview or hand tracking or like maybe a game. So yeah, feel free to leave a comment what you like to do, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're serious about taking your TouchDesigner and interactive skills to the next level, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. It's the only educational resource and community of its kind for TouchDesigner and interactive professionals. You can learn more by checking out the link in the description. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit subscribe and the little bell icon for more awesome free content.